And with that, Cindy Lenhoff, the Director of the National Child Care Association, I give it to you.
Thank you, Diane. Hello again, everyone. I cannot express to you how happy that I am that so many of you are able to join us today, or perhaps even listen in later to the recording because you signed up and got distracted. I know I don't have to tell you how busy and overwhelmed you might be at this time by the issue of staffing challenges, getting access to your ARP funds, and understanding all of the proposals that are before Congress that will change childcare as we know it. We believe change is inevitable and frankly necessary. We also believe in ensuring the right changes occur. And this will not happen without a unified and informed voice from childcare business owners and educators getting involved. So as part of our mission to promote or to provide licensed childcare providers support, we are pleased to have as our special guest and presenter today, Jacob Stewart from the Early Childhood Education Consortium in Washington, D.C. We've been partnering with Jake and his team on the UPK proposal and how to be advocates for ourselves as childcare owners. And some of you have listened in on some of those bi-weekly calls, and certainly we wanted him to come to the bigger audience. We first met Jake at Childcare Aware when he was with that nonprofit organization advocating for children and childcare providers and families. He does lead the government relations practice of Early Care and Education Consortium for in-state grassroots campaigns. So he is here to help us by, explaining to us what we can do and to give us more information about what is happening as we speak, the latest on the Hill. Thank you, Jake. Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Cindy. And I am just going to share my screen because I do have a presentation for you all. And before I get started, I just wanted to thank NECBA and the National Child Care Association again. I actually have had the privilege of working with Cindy and Storm for several years now, which is kind of surprising to say, but I was previously at Child Care Aware of America before I moved over here to the Early Care and Education Consortium. And then before that, I actually did work on Capitol Hill. I worked on the Senate for a few years, and then that was before I was a teacher, like that was referenced earlier. And also, I am going to make sure that I send out these slides so everybody has access to everything that's shared here. I'll be giving you a lot of information, some of which you likely already know and may have seen before, some of it which may be new. But as mentioned before, open to all types of questions. And I'm actually going to start off with a very simple question that I know a lot of us know the answer to, and it is, what is mixed delivery? And I would actually love, for you to just take, 30 seconds to type in a response. If a state or federal lawmaker were to ask you this question, what would you tell them? What is mixed delivery? Seeing a few responses so far. We'll give it another 30 seconds, see if anyone wants to. You're all right, and you all know what it is. This is more just how would you describe it to someone else? Great. Seeing some great answers. And really, you know, again, all of these answers are right. And the reason why I stress this question though is we need to be able to articulate what we mean by mixed delivery to state and federal lawmakers in order for mixed delivery to truly happen and actually come into existence. I will say that advocates who have been, you know, advocating to members of Congress have been doing a great job so far, because many members of Congress and their staff now know that mixed delivery is important. A few years ago, I would have never even thought that I would hear the term mixed delivery come from staff or from members of Congress or even from the White House, and they're at least understanding that it's important. But we need to get them to understand truly what mixed delivery is and what it means in order to make sure that it's implemented, because now they know it's important, but now it's really about getting into the details of how to actually achieve it. I'm going to share with you a video. I actually hope many of you have seen this video before, but if not, hopefully it's a welcomed video on your ends. Just going to actually pull it up here. Oh, sorry, are you guys able to hear the sounds? I think I need to.
No, but we will. We have faith.
Yeah, I forgot there's special settings that I can activate here. Need to get my, one moment.
You are all good. And some of you have seen that we asked earlier about where you came in from. So let us know. We've got all kinds of different states, which we'd love to see.
Yeah, we have California, Maryland, Florida, Connecticut, Georgia, New Jersey. My goal is to someday wake up Minnesota. Hello. My goal is to someday have all 50 states represented on one of our calls. Definitely got Georgia. More than one person from Georgia, who we all know already has a state pre-K mixed delivery. Arkansas.
Florida in here too. So cool. Thank you all for being here.
It's going to take us all holding hands. Texas has arrived. It's going to take us all holding hands across the country to make great things happen for childcare. Illinois, welcome Illinois.
All right, I'm not sure. We'll try this one more time. I don't want to waste too much time on this. Still no sounds.
It's a great video. Maybe we could send it out.
Well, it'll be with my slides for sure, because that link that I provided directly goes there. But what it is it's a video from.
Uh-oh. So we all know how these Zoom calls can sometimes go. So we'll just keep an eye out for Jay to get back, but it looks like he just got cut off there for a moment.
Kansas has come on board. So far I see 11 different states reaching out. But we do have about 50, I think, 2 participants. We had 128 people that signed up. So we know we got a lot of folks that are going to hear what Jake has to tell us.
All right, apologies. Obviously having some technical difficulties. It's as if I have not been on Zoom for the past year and a half. I am just going to try to share my screen. I just got to be made a host again.
Yeah, Jake, you have to be made a host. Okay, so we have, okay, make co-host. We have a participant that said if you stop sharing screen and click share sound icon and reshare, you will have sound for us. Thanks, Corinne.
Oh, if I stop sharing screen,
And
say that
click
again.
share sound and click share sound icon and reshare, you will have sound for us.
Where is the share sound icon? Oh, I see that actually. Okay.
If you stop sharing, yeah, it's at the bottom.
I
Thanks,
did find
Corinne.
that. Now let me just, whoops. Okay, let me move this. This is not what I want you to see. All right, fingers crossed. Can you hear the sound now?
When it comes to taking legislative action on early childhood, the train has left the station. Policymakers and the public alike have jumped on board. It's our best chance in decades to give American families the support they so desperately need, starting with childcare and universal pre-K. But as the train gathers speed, there's a danger up ahead that could derail everything down the line. It has to do with potential plans to create a free universal pre-K system for 3- and 4-year-olds based primarily in public schools, instead of one built on the mix of options we have now, which includes childcare centers and home-based providers. To understand why this is a danger, you have to start with one very basic idea. Taking care of babies is just a lot of work. That's why states require a ratio of at most 4 children to 1 adult for infant and toddler care. The job doesn't get any easier as kids get older, but it does get less labor intensive. In most states, the teacher-to-student ratio for preschool is closer to 1 to 10. What that means is if you run a childcare business, you have to charge families more for babies than for preschoolers because you need to pay for more teachers per student. To make this work financially, most providers mix the two, in effect allowing the older kids to offset the babies and toddlers. But here's the catch. Many proposals for a free public school-based pre-K system, no matter how well-intentioned, would siphon off 3- and 4-year-olds. That would force community providers to do one of 3 things: hike tuition, making parents pay the true cost of infant and toddler care, cut salaries, making already low wages even more unlivable for teachers, or simply give up and go out of business. One thing's for sure, the impact on infant and toddler care in America would be devastating. As if that weren't enough, the shift to school-based pre-K could even make things harder for the very people it's trying to help. Working parents whose childcare needs don't end at 3:30 or take the summer off. In fact, 73% of parents say it would be a better option for them if pre-K were in a childcare program with longer hours. So before the train gets too far down the track, let's be sure we're heading in the right direction. A mixed delivery system that supports high-quality pre-K anywhere childcare is available, not just in schools. Because that's the best way to get where we all want to go. Affordable, accessible, high-quality early care and education for all families.
All right, and hopefully you all can hear me now. Can you all hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. And I was told that the audio is working, but then the video wasn't, but that's okay. You all can check out the video later on. But I think my bigger point there was there are tools and resources that can actually help you educate members of Congress and also state policymakers on what mixed delivery is. While we've done a great job of showing members of Congress why mixed delivery is important, we do still come across staff in offices who have never heard the term mixed delivery and still don't know what it is. And we can't advocate for mixed delivery if lawmakers don't understand what mixed delivery is. And the first part is really educating them on that. And their videos like the one from the Bipartisan Resource Center does a great job. Going back to our definition earlier, I know that there are a number of ways that you can describe mixed delivery, and this is a term that we've been using on some co-hosted calls that we've been doing with the National Child Care Association, which is defining mixed delivery as a system in which early learning can be located in any school, licensed child care center, family child care home, Head Start program, or other community-based program that meets agreed upon quality criteria. So, you know, a lot of you were referring to public-private partnership, and it is in essence aligned with that. And we do highlight all of the community-based programs, whether it's a center, whether it's a home, Head Start, all of it should be able to participate, but it should not necessarily just be housed within one or the other. And all of this is really to meet families' needs and give parents a choice. But in addition to describing what mixed delivery is, it's important to describe why it's so necessary. I think videos like the Bipartisan Policy Center video and other resources help us do that. But you all, most of you are business owners and can really describe why being able to have preschool in your schools is helpful to you being able to serve infant and toddler care. And I think connecting those pieces are incredibly important for lawmakers to hear and understand. So it's one thing to describe, what is mixed delivery, but then the next step, and probably the more complex question, is how do we achieve mixed delivery? And this is one that I think states are still grappling with. Some states have done a great job of getting there, but I think other states are still trying to work through how to achieve that. And this is just a model, and again, we'll share this out with the slides, but it's a model of different types of UPK systems that states could have, just depending on how the state distributes the funding. This is also placed in order of a continuum. So on the left side is more of what we see as true parent choice, in terms of navigating a strong mixed delivery system. And then moving over to the right side, which is for us, what we would consider worst case scenario, in which, all of preschool is housed within public schools, and that is not mixed delivery at all. And you have sort of all these places in between, and we have different examples of all of these places. I think a voucher-based mixed delivery system is best, but some states are nowhere close to being able to set up a voucher-based mixed delivery system. So, when it comes to planning on the state level, maybe what the better solution is, if it's a state that's going all through public schools, is to get from that public school only model to the school administered mixed delivery model, but with required percentages. We've seen states like Maryland has made that transition, and they've actually made some pretty strong percentages required in what they're crafting now, and then perhaps it's moving the school administered mixed delivery to making it administered by the state. I would say that Colorado is a great example of that, by creating a new Department of Early Childhood, and by creating that new department, they're creating a new mechanism for how that funding will flow. So all of these are really, they're moving away from the question of what is mixed delivery, and they're moving more towards the question of how do we get there. And the reason why I say all of this is, and I'm about to move on to talk about the Build Back Better plan in a moment, but at the end of the day, no matter what's in the Build Back Better plan, many decision points on mixed delivery in preschool are going to lie at the state level. There is going to be a planning phase, if there was to be federal funding to come down, that states would have to show how they plan to achieve mixed delivery. And that truly is a win that we got added into the Build Back Better plan, is that states have to plan and really demonstrate how they're going to achieve mixed delivery and how they're going to prevent unintended consequences, especially on infant and child care. Because they're doing this planning phase, I think it's incredibly important that providers and centers, particularly private providers, make sure that they have a seat at the table. So I think it's crucial to start thinking through, what would you recommend to your state to make these changes? And so I would start doing that now. I also wouldn't do it alone. I would try to find any advocacy coalitions. You might already be a part of this, so I might be feeding you information that you are already doing, which is great. But I think it's important to start working with coalitions and other groups to start creating a proposal on recommended changes. The more you do it ahead of time, the more you're saving yourself down the road, because we know that there's a strong likelihood this funding will be coming, but we also know that some states are nowhere near where they need to be to get to strong mixed delivery. So just wanted to start off with that. But now I'm actually going to go and go through the Build Back Better plan. Over the last week, there's been a lot going on Capitol Hill. So I'm actually going to rewind and walk through the timeline a little bit that we've seen so far this fall, just to clarify, because I know that there's been, at this point now, there's been 2 versions of text. There's been different messaging points from the White House, from members of Congress. And so just wanted to walk through the timeline of what we've seen. So in September, around mid-September, I would say the second week of September is when we first saw the text released of the Build Back Better plan. And we did see childcare hearings in the House, not in the Senate, but there were hearings in the House, and these were markup hearings. And the House did move forward with votes on the Build Back Better plan, but it really got stalled in the Senate, and negotiations weren't really able to move forward. Also in September, Congress was up against a September 30th deadline for federal funding, which was separate from infrastructure funding. And so a lot of the negotiations were really tied to that. But on around September 30th, Congress did extend the federal funding. They did a continuing resolution through December. So basically they said, we're going to deal with that later. We'll continue to fund programs for now, and we're going to continue negotiations. Because again, all of this was centered around negotiations. In October is when many of these negotiations have been taking place really behind the scenes or in quiet conversations. And this was both on infrastructure, but also on budget reconciliation. You all may have heard about the debt ceiling, and October 18th was a date that they had to expand the debt ceiling. That's also been, they also dealt with that as they needed to, but infrastructure never received the vote. House Speaker Pelosi had said many times that she wanted to get a vote on the Build Back Better plan, again, by October 31st. That did not happen, so we are past that deadline. But what did happen last week was updated text was released. And the updated text was pinned around the new number. The initial text in September was pinned around a $3.5 trillion plan. But the new text is pinned to a $1.75 trillion plan. But childcare and preschool remained a part of the proposals, and that's a big deal because a lot of things were cut between the 2 plans, but childcare and preschool were not cut. So it really does show a commitment from the administration and from Congress that they want to get something done on childcare. So moving ahead over the next 2 months, there is a potential passage of the Build Back Better plan finally. In the House, a vote could happen honestly as soon as tomorrow, but we think the Senate either way is going to take a little bit more time, and we think a lot of the negotiations, or most of the negotiations, will happen on the Senate side, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, as I'm sure you've heard, have been asking for a lot in regards to this process. We imagine after the vote for those of you in Virginia, but after the votes in Virginia and New Jersey last night, there's going to be more moderate members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, who are going to have a lot more to say about some of their interests and priorities. All of this is going to affect negotiations on this, but we do anticipate potential passage of the full bill. It could happen. It could happen before Thanksgiving, but it could also happen before the end of the year. But keeping in mind that we still have that Congress still needs to deal with fiscal year 2022 funding, which they had kicked off to December as well. So it might be, in line with those. So that's a summary of the timeline, but let's now break down what was in both of the bills and what are the major differences and what do we have left. So as I told you before, in September is when we first saw the text of the Build Back Better plan released, and it was paid to the $3.5 trillion top line number. So the overall package was $3.5 trillion. I did make a note, the CDCTC, which stands for the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, it was included in the first version of the bill. This is really important because I think that many of you may have families that take advantage of the CDCTC, especially this past year when the American Rescue Plan had expanded that, and they may be using that to help fund or pay for your services. And if that is removed, then those families are no longer going to have those funds. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later, but just wanted to note that for you all. Childcare and universal preschool were something that were both included, but to explain those a little bit further, the bill created two new entitlement programs. The first one was for childcare, but it was focused specifically around birth to 5. And that's separate from, it would be separate, but in addition to CCDBG, which, as you know, goes birth through 13. So again, this would basically be a child care entitlement that's just more focused on birth to 5 children. And then the second entitlement would be the universal preschool entitlement. It was centered around, or as it said in the bill, for children ages 3 to 5. I mentioned CCDBG would still continue, and that's something I do want to make clear that in both versions of the bill, there's no major changes this is making to CCDBG, and that program would still continue either way. Diving into the child care entitlement, so originally there was $250 billion that was allocated for the child care entitlement. Again, it was birth to 5. One of the major changes specifically for childcare is about reimbursement rates. So for providers who serve subsidy families, this is really important. The bill calls for the rates to be set to what we call cost of quality studies. And this is as opposed to using market rate surveys. I think all of us know by this point that market rate surveys are not the best tool to be pegging reimbursement rates to, because market rate surveys are surveys of what parents pay, but they are not necessarily a survey as to the actual cost of providing care, which we know is often significantly more. So the goal of this was to make states truly think about the cost of providing high quality care and making sure that was reflected in reimbursement rates. There's a lot of promise in this, and so far there is one state in the country that has done that. That state is New Mexico. They officially tied rates to a cost of quality study instead of a market rate survey starting on July 1st. And looking at the data, the rates are so strong. In fact, the rates for infant and toddler care are competitive with private pay rates. And that's truly remarkable. And that's a positive, we would say, in the bill. But we did have some other concerns, but that was one positive. In addition to rates, though, and I know that this is something that a lot of people have been concerned about, the bill called for a wage ladder. And I think what we communicated a lot to Congress was, if there's going to be a wage ladder, there needs to be a requirement that states pay enough to providers to be able to actually meet the wages. So this goes back to rates need to be paid in full. They can't be, paid. I don't want to see 25% of the rate paid or 30% of the rate paid, as we know that states are doing with the market rate survey. So we need to see full rates. So that was really something we're emphasizing. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that in childcare, there was a 90-10 state match. So states would have to fork over 10% of the funds in order to access the other 90%. And I'll bring up why that's important in the next section, actually. We also had this universal preschool section for $200 billion. And it was aimed for children ages 3 to 5. I will say the term universal is used broadly here. I wouldn't call it universal. I would call it preschool expansion. But you know, the Democrats have been really utilizing the term universal preschool. Mixed delivery was mentioned, but throughout the preschool section, which was good to see, but it had no teeth to it. In fact, it didn't really have a formal definition to mixed delivery, and it wasn't quite clear how states were supposed to show that they were meeting mixed delivery. You know, as we know, I think you may have heard the term mixed delivery in name only, and the way the bill was written, in our opinion, really made it seem like states could just say they were doing mixed delivery, but in actuality, there was no real mixed delivery happening. And then finally, going back to the match rate, it actually had a different match rate than the childcare entitlement, which we thought was interesting. So the match rate for preschool would have been 100% in the first year. So states would have not had to pay anything in order to access and pull down all the funds. But over time, over the next 4, 5, 6 years, that would go down to a 60-40 match. This was a concern for us because we were really afraid that states would be more tempted to take the preschool funding in the first year over the childcare funding. And for those of you that are in states that have to go through the legislature, especially, that was a big red flag for us because, you know, the states don't have to pay anything to get the preschool dollars, but they did have to pay for the childcare dollars. In this bill, states are allowed to take one and not the other. And that made us really nervous because if there's going to be investments in preschool, but not in childcare, what would that mean, especially for infant and toddler? So those were all of our concerns in the first version, and fortunately we were able to get these concerns in front of members of Congress. And so some of them, you know, we were able to flag with and were addressed, some of them were not, but I just want to talk about sort of the high level differences in the second version that just came out last week. The big one is that the top line number was reduced to 1.75 trillion. Surprisingly, that did not affect childcare and preschool as much as we thought it would. However, it did mean the removal of the child and dependent care tax credit. So if you have any families that utilize that credit to help pay for your services, again, that credit would be going away. We are making the ask to Congress to continue providing the CDCTC. There are still 2 separate entitlements for birth to 5 and for preschool ages 3 to 5. CCDBG would still continue as is. Childcare was slightly reduced with there's an entitlement still for birth to 5. Something that worried us a little bit is we felt that in the first version of the bill, rates were supposed to be paid by the full cost of quality. And a language change that concerns us a little bit is right now it says rates need to be set in accordance with the cost of quality. I know that sounds similar, but why that makes us nervous is it makes us feel that states will be allowed to pay a portion of the rate of the cost of quality and not the full rate of the cost of quality. And in our opinion, that kind of gets us back to square one because rates, that's the problem today. Many states just pay a portion, in some states an abysmal portion of their market rate surveys, and providers are not incentivized to take families on subsidy for that reason. So we are going to be messaging about this, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But another major change to childcare, and I forgot to put it on here, but I will say it now. The childcare entitlement in this version goes all the way up to 250% of state median income for eligibility. That's huge. Right now, the highest states in the country go to 85% of state median income. So we're talking about a more than double of what some of the highest states in the country are already doing. And also that makes us a little nervous about families, especially in the 150 to 250% of state median income bracket, who are a lot of our private pay families, who are the same families that often help offset the costs of taking low-income families and families utilizing reimbursement, now they're going to be qualifying for subsidies. So what does that mean? And if rates are not paid in full, that makes us a little bit nervous. There's still a wage ladder that's put in place with the child care entitlement. But one improvement we did see was there's a much better state match rate. So the state match rate is 95-5 now, or approximately. They use some really bizarre percentages, but it's close to 95-5. And that's going to make it more likely that states at least accept the entitlement. The preschool section, I would say overall was greatly improved. Again, it's still for children 3 to 5, but the mixed delivery provisions in the preschool section are much stronger than they were before. It also requires the state to work with an advisory council to help come up with the plan. And the advisory council is made up of stakeholders. And right now it's aligned to the same advisory council that they use for Head Start implementation. So that's great. We think that those were great provisions. And then the second strong addition to the bill was that the match rate was aligned with childcare. So states are not as incentivized to take one and not the other. I mean, they might be incentivized for different reasons, but at least it's not because they have to put up more money for childcare than they would for preschool. So we were happy to see that as well. So again, this is a summary of some of the improvements, which I know that some of these I've already covered. One is that the childcare and universal preschool are now, they run at equal lengths. Before they didn't even run at equal lengths. In addition to the match rates being different, it maintains the licensing requirements in the birth through 5 program, which we thought were good. Again, I spoke about the federal share already, and the differences with preschool and birth to 5, and those being aligned is great. And then again, I spoke to the strength of the mixed delivery model, so that there are more assurances in the bill to ensure that states actually truly meet mixed delivery, and it's not just being mentioned. But we do still have a couple of concerns, and I'll talk about the concerns with preschool, and then move on to the concerns with the birth through 5 child care entitlement. So our concerns through preschool, is again, we thought preschool was a lot stronger, but we do feel like one thing that definitely worries us is that a state is allowed to choose a different lead agency for preschool than they would for childcare. In some states, this may not be a problem. They may designate this as the same lead agency, but in other states, this means that the childcare dollars can go to the Department of Human Services, and the preschool dollars can go to the Department of Education. That concerns us, and we originally asked if there could be at least a requirement to make sure that these pots of funding are coordinated, that these offices have to speak to each other, because we feel like when those dollars are separate and the offices aren't speaking to each other, it just creates a headache for providers and ultimately a headache for families. So we are trying to encourage language to make sure there's at least better coordination on that front. The bill also continues to impose different standards on licensing for lead education agencies than it would for other provider types. This is something that is a big deal, and I'm sure you all have heard about this, that public schools are not held to the same rigorous standards that childcare facilities are held to. And I think that this is something that needs to change, and ideally it would be something that could be changed or mandated federally. And if it's not mandated federally, I think you should absolutely advocate for this at the state level, because children should be accessing facilities that are all held to the same standards, especially if the schools are going to be allowed to care for younger children now. And then finally, the bill requires full utilization of Head Start slots before building new infrastructure, but fails to include comparable requirements for the utilization of existing community-based childcare slots. I would add into this, and this is something that was also included in the bill. I mentioned before that states don't have to take the funding. But there are going to be grants. Oh, actually, I'll talk about this in a little bit as well. But there are grants that cities can access for this. But if for some reason a state chooses not to take the funding, basically the bill says that they will put more funding into Head Start in that state. And that makes us worried, because if Head Start's getting funding, but community-based providers aren't getting funding, suddenly we're seeing a mismatch in terms of the resources that are given. And we just want to make sure that that's being thought through. Some other continued concerns we have for the child care program, and I know I talked about this before, but right now the bill requires states to go all the way up to 250% of state median income. This wouldn't be right away. This actually would be over time. In the first year, it would be 100% of state median income. The second year, I believe, goes to 125%. The third year goes to 150, and then the fourth year makes the jump from 150 to 250. Our concern is if states have to qualify so many families for subsidy, but they're not required to pay the full rate, what does a state do if they don't have enough funding to meet the number of families who are eligible? And we feel that the states are going to pay a lower rate, because that's what they've been doing for years, right? When they don't have enough funding, they just decide to pay lower rates. And when there's low rates, then providers are unable to recoup their costs of care. And this is where we see a crumbling of the market. I'll be honest, our number one ask probably is going to be that they focus on rates first before they go expanding eligibility to all these families, because they need to fix the rate situation first and foremost before they can do that. Otherwise, you're just multiplying a problem that already exists by a lot more families. We also do feel that the bill misses several items that could result in an incomplete cost of care model. So, if a state does a cost of care model and misses out on a lot of items that we know contribute to the cost of care, then that's a problem, because suddenly the state is deciding not to take that into account to pay its rates on. So we have a few concerns there. A few concerns on the payment practices, of course, which I just highlighted. There are also grants to localities that I had mentioned. So basically, if a state chooses to turn down the funds, cities or localities within that state can apply for grants to still accomplish the same goals that are set out by this legislation. There's a couple problems with that, but one that we have is it's only $1 billion. So what happens if it's a lot of localities applying for this, because states turn this down? We don't know if that's really been thought through well. And then, of course, I know I mentioned this, but the expanded CDCTC was removed. That's something that we are going to put into our advocacy as well, which that is the next part of this presentation. So we have sort of three key overall messages. I know that I just threw a lot at you, by the way. There's a lot of components on this bill. So we really want to summarize three key messages. One is that we want childcare and preschool to be included in the final package. And so that's great. It is included. We want it to continue to be included. And we also want the investment. We know that we're in a significant moment right now for our field to finally get the public funding that is needed to help families and help providers. We do think that this investment includes the CDCTC, and so we want to make sure that Congress is putting through that full investment. And then the third message is one that I think addresses two of our concerns. Congress needs to think about equity on this. First, they need to think about states opting in or out. We are afraid that some of the child care provisions go so far in terms of mandating what states need to do that we could see states turning down the funds, especially if there's a match required. If states have to pay money in order to help a family at 250% of state median income get childcare, you may live in one of the states that you can almost guarantee would turn down that money. we don't think Congress should just shrug their shoulders and offer grants. We think they really need to think about that, because ultimately it's children, the young children who lose in those states, and you know, access to early education could be life-changing for them. So that's something that they should think about. And then the other equity argument is rates, like we were talking about. Congress needs to fix the rate problem first for the lowest income families before they decide that a family who's making $150,000, $200,000 a year needs a subsidy. And you know, not saying that those families shouldn't get assistance in any way, but we do think that the rates should be fixed first. And then there's an equity argument that's embedded in there. As far as strategy, and this is really sort of what can you do? One is reach out to lawmakers, especially federal lawmakers right now, if you're able to, and you know, continue to highlight the importance of mixed delivery. I'll send out these slides, and that link, check out our resources. It is a link that goes to a toolkit that we have for you. And also, I think a discussion that you need to have with lawmakers is, would your state accept these entitlements as they are? If you come from a Republican-led state but you have a Democratic senator, so great examples, Georgia, Ohio has a Democratic senator. So there's a number of states that have, you know, that mismatch. You need to be telling that Democratic senator that you are worried your state will not take this money, and hopefully get that senator to fight more for your state on this. We need to discuss the importance of states paying the full rates. And then, of course, and I know I've mentioned several times, encourage the inclusion of the CDCTC. And then also you need to reach out to your state administrator. If some of you may have a good connection to your state administrator, we would love for state administrators to be acting on this more, and hopefully if they have concerns, they can try to educate your state's federal lawmakers. They may not be able to advocate, but they are allowed to educate, and I think that would be worthwhile. Finally, we are going to be putting together a sign-on letter, and through our Champions of Mixed Delivery calls, we would love to share that with you and get as many sign-ons as possible. One last resource that I want to highlight that we are just releasing today is regarding the ARPA funds. And we really want to show we want to show federal policymakers, but also state policymakers, all of the great decisions that we've seen states make with that flexible childcare funding. We go through and we talk about, we shout out states and all the great things they've done with that money. And really, we want to use this for two different types of advocacy. One, feel free to go through this report and send this to state policymakers to show them, especially if you're in a state that has not done much with the ARPA money, you can show them all the great things other states are doing with this ARPA money, and you know, hopefully that will help them think through what they can do. But second, we did tie it to the federal advocacy, and I think it's worth showing Congress that states can do a lot of great things with flexible childcare funding if they're given the funding. And so we wanted to use this, you know, in both ways, and hopefully this can be just one more tool of the list of tools that we have for the advocacy. All right, I know we could talk about this all day because there's just so many provisions, but I did want to leave time for questions, and so I'll turn it over to Diane to help facilitate this.
Okay, well, thank you. That was a lot of great information and well spoken and well said, Jake. So thank you so much. We've had a lot of chatter, which is wonderful. We love when we see people connecting, especially learning more about what we do. But if you would if you have any questions, I haven't had any specifics come in for you. So if you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and let's ask Jake the questions that are on top of mind right now about what he just gave us. Or you can also message me directly and I can ask for you.
I don't know.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Jennifer Lasker. I'm in Valdosta, Georgia. I really would like for Jacob, if possible, go back and really explain that mixed delivery so I can make sure I really understand when I'm hearing the wording of mixed delivery, what are we really talking about?
That is a great question, and I do want to say, actually, well, we do have resources, and I'll be sure to share this out. And I don't want to mess up the screen sharing again, but I will go back to this slide. So I think it also depends. I'll start with, it depends on where your lawmaker is on the mixed delivery, and I say this because even to this day, I come across some staff or some lawmakers who have heard why mixed delivery is important and why it's needed. But then I've also come across ones that have never even heard the term. So if they've never heard the term, I think this is a great place to start with why it needs to be a number of programs and the participating programs, and it needs to revolve around family choice and in order to help meet those families' needs. So whether it's a school, it's a center, a family child care home, Head Start program, all of these are important for a family to navigate. But when it's just one program, such as public only preschool, that hurts families because they can't navigate those. But I think it's really important, especially as business owners, childcare business owners, to really explain why this will hurt infant and toddler care for families. I'm not sure if lawmakers quite understand the business model of childcare. And I know the video, I wish I could handle technology better. But that bipartisan policy video, and I know Storm dropped the link in the chat, it does a really great job of providing infographics and all of a lot of things to really help explain why mixed delivery is important to the business model of childcare, and which in turn is important to infant and toddler care services being provided to families. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I have a link, that link that I have to the toolkit, and please go through these slides in detail. But this link that I have on this slide, we have a number of resources, but a couple of the resources we have actually are mixed delivery explainers. To help explain what mixed delivery is. We try to give examples of it, and we also try to highlight why it's important. So please, mixed delivery is something that it can be difficult to explain. It took me, especially to someone who's not familiar with childcare, it can be hard to explain. I think using the resources is helpful. I also think, and this is just one last point on this. One time I was talking to a staffer, and her boss, who was a Republican, used to be a doctor. So when I was explaining mixed delivery and reimbursement rates, she actually understood this better from a healthcare perspective than she did just trying to come at it from an education perspective. And that's important because when we think about our healthcare system, sometimes the analogies and the metaphors are actually more similar to compare childcare to healthcare than it is to just pure education. In the healthcare system, we don't have just one type of provider, right? We have many types of providers, some that specialize, some that offer a different range of services, some that are private, some that are public, in order to, help meet the needs, the large needs, health needs of families. It's the same thing with childcare. We can't just have one type of provider out there. There needs to be many types of providers available to families if we're truly going to make this system work. So any sort of analogy that you can think of, I think can help that member or whoever you're talking to really grasp the material better.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have another question that just came in, and it is 1:57. So again, we will have this all recorded, but if you have to get back to your centers, we totally understand. But Irene sent in a question, Jacob, which says, what will happen to those of us private preschool owners who don't provide infant toddler care?
That is a good question. I don't think I don't think anything the worst that could happen, in my opinion, is just it goes back to facilitating a system of mixed delivery. So if you're in a state, if you already have a contract with the state, I would say make sure that your services are protected. If you don't have a contract with the state, I would, I would try to advocate for that state to make sure that this is a true system of mixed delivery, so that you don't lose your families to schools or to places that do accept, or places that are contracted by the state to deliver these services. So I would say a lot of, for those individuals, you absolutely should be part of the planning process. I mentioned there's a planning process in the bill that states have to submit a plan to the feds on how they'll achieve mixed delivery. And if I were you, I would make sure that you have a seat at that table for that planning process, because you absolutely will be impacted by this. You are a stakeholder, you're a provider. Make sure you have a seat at that table.
Okay, and we have from Chris, the issues around competing with public schools as a mixed delivery is extremely difficult, and someone agreed 100%. Any comments on that?
Yes. Actually,
Oh, sorry, Jacob. I didn't know if you meant me or Jacob. I'm Chris. So let me just put that in context. Maryland, my association's fought hard for those percentages, starting out at a 70-30 split, minimums, a 50-50 split. But if you can't compete with regard to making sure the teacher meets the requirements of the state, and when you have teachers unions and we're under the State Department of Education, we have to meet those. And we also have a QRIS system. I got them to, it's a 1 to 5 scale. I got us in at a level 3 so that we would have a better playing field. So we're working hard in our state, but it's still difficult. And not only is it difficult to get a lot of diverse women that maybe or don't have their bachelor's degrees working towards certification, our state pays for that. They'll pay for their education for free, but it's getting non-traditional students, which takes 10 years or more to get that degree. So we really have to find alternative pathways and some credit for experience and a lot of different things that we need to grapple with at other levels. I appreciate your work, and I know that what you're doing makes a difference, because when you hear congressmen stand up and say, pre-K can only be in public schools, you want to jump through the screen. And I know that this is helpful. And I work with Senator Van Hollen and Cardin, and give them a lot of information. And I will share even more of what you are doing as well. But there's a lot of obstacles at every level, local, state, and federal.
And I absolutely, Chris, by the way, we've spoken about some of the great work you're doing in Maryland and to other states too, because I really do think it's fantastic what you're pushing for. So thank you for that. But then also I will say how we position ourselves with the schools is important. With some lawmakers, if we come across as anti-school, that can be difficult. But if we make sure that we're saying mixed delivery is schools, it's centers, it's family childcare, it's everybody, you will go a lot further in the conversation. So
you got to keep children first, and you have to say, if it's going to be the same, just like you were saying, it's got to be the same. It can't just be, so we want them to do, the public schools to have the same settings that we provide for development appropriate practice. And we know that they don't always, and they don't utilize those practices as they should in many cases. But then we can't say, well, we don't need a certified teacher. Like, we can't say those things without having, we have to say we'll get there, and we don't want to drive out a workforce that looks like these children. And we want to have choices for families, and the wraparound care is built in. We get all that, but you have to come at the not business perspective, because I think Luke said, what happens to our business? You can't come at this necessarily all from a business perspective. The unintended consequences are extremely important, and what that looks like for families.
And I know we're out of time, so this will be the last thing I say. Absolutely right, Chris. And actually, I would say come at this from an equity perspective, because we are, the political reality is it's Democrats that are the ones that are doing most of the negotiating of the bill. Equity is a huge, that is your entrance point to talk to Democrats. But we know that this is equity. We know that this will hurt families. And so just apply all those same talking points, but just reposition them to be family-centered and child-centered. And that's it.
Well, I'd like to say
Always-
thank you. Oh, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to all of our participants and Jake, and certainly I think that the information that you brought to us today is hot off the presses and really makes us all better advocates. We can't thank you enough for sharing it. And I would just encourage everybody to keep the lines of communication open and give me a call or shoot me an email. Let's work on this together so that we get the best result for kids and families and owners. Because I've always said, you know, what's good for kids and families is good for business. And we should lead with, as Chris said and Jake said, we should lead with what's good for families. And, you know, the parents are the people that vote for our legislators. And we need to help them carry this message, because it's not going to be convenient for them to have to bring their infant to childcare and their 3-year-old to a public school. And we need to keep, you know, all of those opportunities available. So we can do this. We just got to keep talking to each other. All right. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks, Cindy, and thank you, Jacob.
Thanks, Diane.